Restoring men in history, the Battle of Princeton and George Washington. You want to have success in life? Have the virtues of Washington. You want success in business and life? Have the resilience of his men at the Battle of Princeton. Now remember this. When they crossed the Delaware the first time, took 5 days, and we talked about the Battle of Trenton. They've gone through, they were already hungry, starving, meeting all these adversities. And here they come on January 3rd for the Battle of Princeton. But on January 2nd, what happened? They fought the Battle of Assunpink Creek. And before that, they fought the Battle of Trenton. So here we are. They were already tired before the Battle of Trenton. And they've gone through this. And they're going to have to march about 12 miles toward Princeton after the battle yesterday, January 2nd. This is January 3rd. Remember, Washington's going to lead from the front. You can get a lot of virtues. If you decide to live your life like Washington or these men, you will have the virtues, resilience, courage, and these virtues that I think will make you a success in life. They marched 12 miles. Remember this, Washington was 44 in February, he would have been 45, and remember at the time the life expectancy was, depending on the stat you read, 35 or 38. 35 or 38, he's 44. And remember, he's not pushing buttons as a general today. He's riding a horse 12 miles. Camping out, going through the snow, going through adversity, and all the pressure of command is on him. And an army that's depleted, hungry, tired, and he's been going through this, living this way. Think about that. And think about these men marching in the cold, freezing. And they've been going at this for months and months and months. So let's look at this. So Washington pushes these men. Why do they do it for him? Because he's an inspirational leader. Chernow, we're going to read from Ron Chernow, the chapter on Princeton. Ron Chernow, Washington, A Life Again. And then maybe we'll do one from The Crossing, David Hackett Fisher later. But this one's from Ron Chernow, Washington, A Life. Now, he pushing them to do this march. Remember what they've gone through. They're weary, they're tired. He writes that some of them fall asleep standing up on the march when they take a break. They were numb and in a trance, mummy-like, he says, almost. When they get there, they have to repair a bridge, Stony Brook, south of town. Then the army divides into two groups. Sullivan's division veered northeast, Greene's moved due north. Now, the first fighting erupted, like in many wars, unexpectedly. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Mawhood was about to rush two British regiments to Trenton and to Cornwallis to aid him when he encountered American forces under General Hugh Mercer, an interesting guy, supposedly one of the best dressers in the Army according to Washington's Crossing. I think it's in that book, and it's in this one as well. But I think he even wore a cravat, it says in Washington's Crossing. But anyway, and Knox said that they were astonished. Both were astonished. I believe they were as much astonished as if any army had dropped perpendicularly upon them, Knox says. Mawhood ordered a ferocious bayonet charge. Remember, this is a bayonet charge. You're going to see these guys coming at you with a bayonet, not like today in many cases, and sometimes that does happen today. But these guys were warriors, right? I mean, you're going to see the guys coming at you. So they do this bayonet charge toward Mercer's men. Mercer, the American general, was knocked off his horse, given a merciless drubbing as he lay on the ground, and they captured. And Chernow calls him the dapper, handsome Mercer. In fact, he was a friend of George Washington's from Fredericksburg, and they thought they had taken the commander-in-chief himself. And they said this, "Call for quarters, you damned rebel," they taunted him, to which Mercer retorted, "I am no rebel," and slashed at them with his sword. Now think about that. Here's a guy, a general, slashing with his sword at them, who knows he's gone and he's outnumbered, still fighting. He's not going to give up. He's not going to give in. That's courage and resilience. You see what you can have from this and learn from this? Can you have the courage and resilience of General Mercer? Because we want these to also be, in this case, in this particular one, a good life lesson for you men. Because you're going to face adversities and you're going to have to overcome them. Be like General Mercer was here. He stayed true and brave to the cause. The Battle of Princeton helped Washington thrive. It was a perfect space for him, like I talked about and introduced earlier, compact space, and Chernow talks about it as well. I've read many books on this. 18th century battlefield was a compact space. It cramped contours defined by the short range of muskets and bayonet charges. So you got bayonet charges coming at you. What did that do? That gave Washington a chance to flourish because he was a lead from the front battle commander, one of the best. When Mercer's men began to retreat, they were being chased by flashing bayonets. General Greene directed Pennsylvania militia into the fray only to have them collide with Mercer's fleeing men amid a shower of grape shot. The Americans panicked. And guess what happened when they panicked? Suddenly, Washington circles into view and exhorts the men to stand and fight. Now that is a general. He says, "Parade with us, my brave fellows." Example of courage, and Washington leading from the front. He exclaimed, waving his hat. What did that do? Made him a big target. And Washington continually does this through the war. French and Indian War on. He puts himself at the center and the forefront of the fight. A great example to men in virtue. He even wrote a book on the virtues of men, but let's go on. There is but a handful of the enemy, and we will have them directly. Confidence. And confidence, I think, inspires men from a battlefield commander, and Washington had it here. He says, let's go. He leads them. He says, we got them. Let's go. According to his aide-de-camp, Colonel John Fitzgerald, Washington rallied the men with an act of unbelievable bravery, and Washington had that. Again, he's not a guy sitting 3,000, 6,000 miles away. He's not operating with drones. This guy's leading from the front. He reined in his horse, faced the enemy directly, and simply froze. Now imagine that. Bullets are flying all around. Washington freezes and holds on that horse, facing the enemy. Yet again, the intrepid Washington acted as if he were protected by an invisible oar, Chernow says. When the British entrenched beyond a hillside force, Washington lengthened and strengthened the Patriot lines in command, instructing, giving orders. Presence of mind. Not coward. Not confused. Decisive, another manly virtue. And organizing the men and leading. Clear presence of mind. He told his men, don't fire until told so. He rode along the line with great courage. Then he personally led the charge up the hill. He personally led that charge up the hill, halting only when they had pushed within 30 yards of their adversaries. As he issued the command to fire, Washington on his white charger was very conspicuous, right? You can see this guy. He's on a white charger, white horse in the middle of it, still leading 30 yards away. This guy is the guy. Fitzgerald clapped his hands over his eyes because he was scared. He was scared because he couldn't bear to see his commander shot, George Washington. That's inspiration. When you're cared more about your commander than yourself, you know Washington's doing a lot right. That's inspirational to men to lead from the front. When the bullets erupted everywhere, the enemy scattered, Fitzgerald finally peeked and saw Washington untouched, sitting proudly atop his horse. He wasn't scared of Washington, or at least he wasn't showing he was scared. Let me say that. I don't know what he was at the time. I wasn't there. Fitzgerald says, thank God, Your Excellency is safe. They called him that during the war a lot, His Excellency. And he was an excellent man, as Aristotle would say. He's reached excellence. Fitzgerald said to him, almost weeping with relief, imagine your men being so concerned they're about to weep for you. Washington, in face, took his hand fondly. Away, my dear Colonel, and bring up the troops. The day is our own. That's confidence. That inspires men. Fitzgerald wasn't the only one. Another guy said this, I shall never forget what I felt when I saw him brave all the dangers on the field and his important life hanging, as it were, by a single hair with 1,000 deaths flying around him. Imagine all this death occurring around you, and you don't want to see your commander die because he's the guy, and he makes it. And Washington had, I think, really divine intervention, divine protection. The officer continued and left with this, believe me, I thought not of myself how many men getting shot at with bullets flying everywhere would be thinking of their commander more than themselves. That's the kind of commander Washington was. One of my heroes, George Washington. Love this guy. Washington spurred his house after them, and he was exhilarated. He was excited. And he said, it's a fine fox chase, my boys. But there were men lying around dying. bloody field. In the battle's concluding chapter, 200 British troops sought asylum in the principal college building, Nassau Hall. According to legend, Alexander Hamilton deployed his artillery against the building and decapitated, this is funny, a portrait of King George II with a cannonball. Pretty funny, right? By the time a white flag of surrender popped up from window, the Americans had inflicted more than 500 casualties and taken between 200 and 300 prisoners. That's a magnificent win and victory, and we needed it. We needed the win for morale, and watch what happens. Only 36 Americans were killed in a one-sided battle. To Washington's surprise and dismay, people started looting, but Washington stopped it. He still had presence of mind. He's an incredible commander. And this was great. He had the field cordoned off by the sentry so we couldn't even loot. This is another amazing story. Washington personally took 2 wounded redcoats to private homes, treated them by surgeons, and had their amputations done by American doctors. Humane treatment of prisoners. Washington said this. He told an officer, British captives should have no reason to complain of our copying the brutal example of the British Army and their treatment of our unfortunate brethren. Now, what did the consecutive victories do? Well, it did a lot. We'll get into that at the end. It raised the morale, but it built something. And what do you need in an army that really makes it fantastic? It built esprit de corps. Do you have that with other men? Do you have these virtues? They had done this battle over British regulars and increased their esprit de corps and confidence. Now, Chernow writes, the psychology of the whole world was reversed. The once British dominance in New Jersey reduced to a few miles. He undercut the Crown's strategy of securing territory and handing out pardons. Nathaniel Greene estimated the Americans had killed or captured up to 3,000 enemy soldiers in a 2-week stretch. That's an amazing success story. And think, if you have these kind of virtues, what you men can sometimes accomplish in 2 weeks or 2 years or 5 years. And I really say look at it over 5 years, 2 years. But this was a 2-week stretch that they accomplished this. This is amazing. They turned the whole war around in a 2-week stretch. Changed the whole war. Henceforth, Chernow says, the British would have to conquer the colonists, not simply cow them into submission. They had bounced back from near despair and now had esprit de corps. A few days ago, they had given up the cause for loss, scoffed the loyalist Nicholas Creswell. Think about that change. Their late successes have now turned the scale, and now they're all liberty mad again. By the way, that was a phrase. This is how important liberty was to Americans back then. A lot of the British people in different biographies and different things would call the Americans liberty mad. I wish we had that today, don't you? Guys like Brian and John have it. I know great men in the groups that have it. We just need more guys to have and be liberty mad. The spirit of liberty needs to reign in us so that we have the Bill of Rights and Constitution protected, lawfully and peacefully. Hessian said this, 4 weeks ago we expected to end the war with the capture of Philadelphia, said the Hessian Captain Johann Ewald, and now we had to render Washington the honor of thinking about our defense. That changes everything. They're not thinking about defense before, now they're thinking about defense because of Washington and his men, their resilience, their efforts. Washington was raised to a whole new level in society of renown. Papers wrote about him. And they had gone from defeated men to valiant heroes. And you can do that in your life. You can turn around your whole life today. Whatever you're going through today, you take action and you think, you can change your life, take it in a new direction with a decision. These men turned the whole war around. Think what you can do with your life by making a decision, taking initiative, and taking action. Now, I'm going to add a quote that I added last time because I think it's so good and important. Frederick the Great said this. Frederick the Great, the achievements of Washington and his little band of compatriots between the 25th of December and the 4th of January, a space of 10 days, were the most brilliant of any recorded in the annals of military achievements. So all his life, you got to remember something about Washington. He had built up to this. He was 44. He had gained and earned all of that. He had the virtues to win this battle, and they showed. And he talks about it. Wisdom, we talk about that. In RMH, we're always talking about the virtues because I believe they're so important to you men for your success in life, in marriage, in health, and in victories for business. Wisdom, courage, fortitude, same qualities Aristotle talked about. Chernow mentions here that Washington had them all on the battlefield that day, and he had them through the war, by the way. Abigail Adams told her friend, "I'm apt to think that our later misfortunes have called out the hidden excellencies of our commander-in-chief." And I think that's true. But Washington built up a lifetime to build these virtues up. What you do tomorrow, what you do next month, what you do this year will build up these virtues so you are prepared as men for this kind of obstacle, for this kind of adversity, so that you can overcome it and achieve, so that you can win in life and business. He had a high purpose larger than himself. And I think men need that. So if you develop your virtues and you have a purpose, I think you can go very far in life. Thank you.